Did you know that more than half of all American workers say they're dissatisfied with their jobs? Well, you won't find any of them here on this podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to Between Tides, where each episode explores fascinating careers and the people who make their lives better through their work. As occupations continue to evolve in an ever-changing world, we no longer want to ask, hey, what do you do for a living? Instead, we want to say, what drives you? What are you excited about? So join us today. We'll dive in. Thanks so much for being here. Oh, yeah. If you ever need a glowing recommendation, we know Jaden. She gave us a great one. That's why we were really excited to reach out to you and to be able to bring you in.
I appreciate it. When she told me this, I'm not one of the people that like to, be in front of the camera and stuff a lot or whatever, but I think that these things are really, really important, especially for some of the stuff we're going to be talking about. What happened in my life and my career, over the past, I shouldn't say this, 48 years, but I'm approaching 2 more years. I'm approaching the milestone here in 2 more years of 50, but I'm happy with the way things have. I think everything has a path, whether it be your career or anything that ends you where you're supposed to be.
So Dave, could you give us just a quick overview and catch us up to speed?
Yeah, if there is a quick overview. So I've wanted to be a funeral director since 7th grade. It was one of those. My sister is about 5 years older than me, so she was looking for college classes, and they had all those books that they give you. So I opened the book, and for some reason the page went to mortuary science, and that's where it started. I started researching about it, and I'm like, and it wasn't so much like, when you're a kid, you like horror movies and those type of things. So some of the classes that I read about the embalming and those type of things kind of caught interest in me. So from that point, I started the journey to pick up like any piece of information I could on that topic. Now, we didn't have the internet. I think it was just starting the internet, if it even was out there yet. So everything, you actually had to go to the library. And
we have to define that for our listeners. The library is
the place with the big books.
That's right.
But and there wasn't a whole lot of information out on it. There really wasn't, as far as for years up until like the generation with the computers. Now you can look anything you want. You can travel on Google Earth to any part in the country, at the tip of your fingers. So there wasn't that type of access. So I would write different schools to get information just to see what the process was. When I got into high school, I went to Ambridge, and Ambridge Area High School, they brought in a funeral director for me to talk to.
Just for you?
Yeah, I thought it was real. Yeah, because I think I was the only one in school. They're like, oh. So
what, can I ask real quick, what was so appealing even at 7th grade?
Yeah.
Like, when you read that, were you into like Egypt's and like mummies and embalming?
I think it was more horror movies. No.
Additional question, what did your friends say when you were like, I'm interested in this?
That's what I became typecast as all through school. So I guess at that point, I think a lot of people, including myself, didn't really know what exactly was all involved until you start reading into it. And even now, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but doing the business for the past 15 years, you realize that it goes beyond just what happens behind the preparation room doors. There's so much more associated and so much more, a feeling of reward, if that's a way to say it. But back then, probably there was a movie called Phantasm, the old one, this was back in the 80s.
No, sure haven't. Sorry.
It's okay. It was about a crazy mortician guy and all this stuff, and they made 3 things for it. So I would watch that, and it just started that appeal. Going to the library, reading more about the product, projects that people did with it. And then also on top of that, there was a book written by Jessica Mitford called The American Way of Death. That book was written in the late 60s, I think it was. Now, not knowing that was the only bit of information I can get my hands on, but it wasn't the best, and I shouldn't probably say this, but the best book for promoting the profession, because they were looking at it as a money-grubbing group of people that are just trying to go in after somebody,
preying on the
weak and the widow. And I couldn't find it, but there was a section in there that talked about the different processes that she actually got to see in embalming and those type of things. And that's the kind of stuff that you could grab back then, So this started, and I was not like an A+ student. I wasn't bad, but I got by. So I wasn't much. I'm very hands-on, so I wasn't much into the stuff they were trying to teach you in school, like algebra, no way, math, no way. So I was like, I need a calculator to add 1 + 1. So when I got out, I started taking core classes in college for mortuary science, and I went to CCBC, and I got a bunch of credits there. And then I was like, I am just burned out. Like, I can't sit in another classroom after being 12, 1 through 12 in high school, and then going into, we called it 13th grade. And so after I got all these credits, I'm like, what am I going to put? There was no degree to put it to. And I don't think I was mature enough really to get into, and when I say mature, myself, yeah, I was mature, but not to sit down and study like you had to do to pass the curriculum for mortuary school. So I was like, what am I going to do? Well, CCBC had an associate's degree in police technology. Never wanted to be a cop, always respected, the profession, but never had nothing that I ever wanted to do with it. So I went to the police academy at Beaver County and got my degree. And long behold, about 3 months, 4 months out of getting out of the academy, I got hired part-time with the police department. So Western Pennsylvania, there's no like full-time jobs right away. You have to work part-time police. So to make a life out of that, you may get 3 or 4 shifts from one place. You have to work for another department, get another 3 or 4 shifts so that you can make your schedule. I was working for 5 boroughs and part-time around the clock. I mean, it was just ridiculous.
Did your schedules ever overlap?
A lot of doubles. So you tried to keep things. I used to have a calendar, and in the calendar, each department one was a yellow highlighter, one was a pink highlighter. I look at that book now, and I'm like, I don't even know how I read the key on this. It was like crazy to get where I was. And when I worked, all the departments had different colored uniforms, so they're all navy blue now. So when I started, the one department was gray, the one department was black, the one department had a gray shirt and black pants. So it wasn't like you could just throw a jacket on and go.
Did you ever wear the wrong shirt or outfit?
I may have done it intentionally just because it was a clean shirt at the time.
Okay.
We had Velcro patches. No, I'm kidding. But so, yeah.
I believed him.
They do it now, trust me. But, as you started doing, I think I had about 3.5 years in part-time of working like that, and then finally got promoted to a police department full-time. And then that's what started that. Never lost the interest, nor did I ever get really away from funeral service. I actually lived above a funeral home while I was a cop.
While you were police?
I always was immersed in that business somehow. And I had a really guy was not licensed, but he was a helper at the funeral home, and he actually taught me a lot while I was there. I always say, and this is to anybody, is be a sponge your whole life. Be a sponge, absorb everything from everybody, even the people that you don't think you're going to pick something up from. Don't discount them, because those are the ones that are going to give you something that you need one day.
Can I go back for just a second? Yeah. So you talked about kind of having the classroom fatigue after doing all that. Then you go to the police academy, do all that, and then balancing 5 boroughs. Like, which one was more stressful, getting out of being in the classroom and feeling spent there versus
I
shifting?
think the classroom work for me was always the hardest. The police academy came easy because it was, I feel that the job is common sense. It's hard now, don't get me wrong. I got out at the right time, but the common sense factor, if you have that and the ability to speak and talk to people, you can go very far in that. I had a very good career with that job. But for me, I'd rather be in the job at the time. It's like anything. People strive to go to college. They want to get out. They want to start their job, whether you're in human resources, if you're in whatever. You want to get out of the school and start into your profession. So for me, it was easy. Even though the schedule was crazy, I already knew what I had to go through to get into it. Mm-hmm. So for me, I'd rather be in the car than in the classroom, with the police.
Yeah, so as an officer, were you ever like, oh boy, I hope there's a dead body so that I can get some practice? We can cut this out if the answer is yes.
Yeah, that went dark quick. But
Maybe, let me rephrase. Maybe not, I hope there's a dead body, but if you ever came across them, were you ever like, okay, I know exactly what to do.
I could take over.
More conflict of interest.
In all honesty, for me, even wanting to do the job, when you don't, I said, going back to the YouTube stuff where you could type in and see an embalming. You could do it right now, see an embalming. I didn't get to see any of that stuff. So there was still that, even though I knew what I wanted to do, there was still that hesitation to actually physically see it, because wanting and doing it are two different things. So with the police, I think my focus then when I was on the job was to do the best I could at that job. First call I saw was, dead. One of the first calls was a person that passed away in the house. And it was different to see somebody like that outside of going to your grandmother's funerals or those type of things. I took my grandmother's passing extremely hard because it was the first. She was our Italian grandma. She was Nonna that made, all the good stuff, and she died at 74 years of age. So that death hit me really hard. And I think in the back of my mind, watching the funeral home that we used was our typical people. And I basically just was really impressed in how we got through that process with the help of the funeral director. So that kind of always stayed back there.
How old were you when she passed away?
Oh, gosh, this was horrible. It was in, how old are you when you're in, I think, 11th grade? So whatever that is.
Okay.
17, 18.
Past your age of when you started being interested in mortuary. Okay.
Yeah, it was before that. But what happened was, with my grandmother passing, it was tragic in many ways because we had a high school dance, first girl I ever asked out to go to this dance. We had a great time. And then I come home and my dad is standing in the doorway saying, hey, Nana passed away. Oh, and I just went into this, I didn't know those feelings because, you could always empathize with somebody that passed, but to actually go through the process yourself, I use that experience to this day when I talk to my families because I can understand if it's somebody's first time or if it's somebody that was really close to you. It hits a nerve, and I go back to that. I can go back to that day anytime in mind. Not that I want to, but that feeling was just the stomach ache and just that what is going to happen. And we buried her on Christmas Eve, so that didn't help either, But
it sounds like it's kind of an anchoring point that you can go back and kind of relate to.
Yeah, it's good in that aspect because it makes you human. For me with this job, jumping ahead to the work I do in funeral service, I love being able to sit. The first thing we talk about when a family comes in, and what's nice about being, and this is where it kind of parlayed, was being a police officer in the community that I have a funeral home in. I knew everybody. And I thank God 1,000 times that I must have done well in the police job because people still say, you helped us out on that job.
Wow.
So this is just a different form of that. And I'm able to get back into those families and touch base with them. I'm able, I'm not that hard of a person where if it hits me to cry with the families because it's a natural thing. You don't have to be the typical undertaker with the black, I'm wearing a black suit, but yeah, this is very odd for me because I'm normally in something colorful, but, to be in that stern, blah, 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 it's not.
Yeah, to be human and have compassion and love and care.
And if you go back to the history of funeral service, going all the way back, even to the word undertaker. Undertaker was used as the person before there were licensed funeral directors and all that stuff. Those were the people that undertook services for when somebody passed away.
Is that where it came from?
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people that did funerals before, even prior to embalming, it was family members would care for the person that passed and bury them. That was part of it, so the family's always been part of that,
This is so dark, but I always assumed that Undertaker was like something from Greek mythology. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like this person takes you under.
Yeah, it's like, and you think about it, and the same thing, anybody can generalize with that, but it's like Undertaker. Then you start to think, you're undertaking this podcast. This is something that you get what I'm saying? So that's what the point was, and then it got into that, the cartoon character, the guy with the big black hat and the stern expression. And then, of course, like I said, the history of it speaks for itself. I mean, it was always about caring for those that have passed, celebrating their life. And the profession has, and I know I'm kind of jumping all over, but the profession has changed so much, and I'll get into that in a minute, but that has changed as well, the way that we honor our loved ones now. Not that we honor them in a different way. You go back even when I was, doing funerals, it was like you'd have the first visitation, then the second day was another visitation, whether it be a longer day or brief, and then the third day we would actually do, and I'm Catholic of faith, we would do the funeral. So it was this long process. Now cremation has become very big in Beaver County. I think we average at our funeral home, it's like 60 to 65% cremation right now. It's becoming a very popular thing. And there's reasoning behind that, not just cost, but cost is one of them. But the other reasoning, too, is the fact that we have people all over the place and a lot of people can't come in for things. So then we do the cremation that allows you to plan further ahead for a celebration of life or something that you want to celebrate. So you're still honoring that person. It's just it's not the traditional way that we used to.
I'm curious. You threw out so many great things.
I
have like
I
all these
know.
other questions.
I know.
I have a passion for this. Yeah.
Yeah. Is part of my mind went to, you referenced this book that I think was from like the 1960s, and how people grieve and how they follow through. Multi-part question. One, I'm already curious about what are like the common misconceptions, even talking about Underworld and Undertaker, but just how things have evolved. And I think back, like my grandfather, I was really close to him when he passed. I was out of college, but had lived in the same city for pretty much his entire life. And I remember his funeral procession was miles and miles long. I mean, it was legit. Like it seemed like the entire city, they knew him. And I've also been to funerals where it's like 4 or 5 cars long because so many people are scattered now that they don't really come back. And just, I feel like the role that you now have to almost care for them more because they're not surrounded by family as much.
And it's a good point, and it's true. For us now, I tell people this before, whereas when somebody passed, the funeral was normally immediately thereafter. A day or two went by and we were having services, and this was even before me. When I got licensed now, we actually hold the person that passed away longer than we view them. So what I'm saying is somebody can die on a Sunday. We may not have the first visitation till Friday, because we have people in California, people in Texas that come in that still want to see their loved ones, and it just takes some time. Whereas before, I know growing up in my dad was 100% Spanish, my mom's 100% Italian, and growing up in that type of ethnic background, Ambridge was a slew of ethnicities. I mean, Polish. They had churches. Ambridge is known for the most churches and bars in Guinness Book of World Records.
Really?
Back in the day. Yeah, I said so.
Cool.
You can sin 6 days of the week and then you repent on Sundays. But that's what I always tell people. But yeah, I mean, there's so many faiths in a 1 square mile town. Everything from the Orthodox faith, the Catholic faith, the Byzantine. I mean, there's so many different facets that you get to see, with that, but things have really, and a lot of people have ventured away from the traditional church too. That's it's their prerogative, and that's the type of things that people do, but it's a fact.
On that topic, how do you deal with different, religions coming in and wanting different things?
Yeah, you learn by fire.
No.
Normally, I'm lucky that's what's so important about this is getting into your community and knowing. A lot of the kids that I went to high school with have all different. My really good friend John, his dad was the Greek priest for years at the Greek church. So when he passed away, we were able to do what he wanted because I was around that. So it's just a matter of, obviously there's a lot of Roman Catholics in the area where we serve. What was new to me was some of the different, like there's a Ukrainian Catholic, there's a Ukrainian Orthodox. So you get to see these things. I mean, there's books, and in mortuary school, they show you the different types of stuff. But until you experience it and you get to know, because it's what the priest likes, because he's the boss. When you go in there and that person passes, that's the way I look at it. I never want to go against, and I ask them profusely, Father or whatever religion it is, Pastor, how do you want to do this? Because I don't want to go against anybody's differences. I want to know the way you do it. And things change over a lot. The Catholic faith, we have new priests every couple years, and everybody has their way of doing things. You just have to be very adaptable and just reverent with them.
So then, in your role, like if there's the funeral service, and then there's obviously the body and the care for it, do you find yourself that's your main priority, and then caring for the family?
So
how much do you integrate into all that?
Here's my big thing, and this is what I've always said, and this is why my business has done well. Is it has to start from the back. And when I say the back would be the viewing room. It has to start with the presentation of the person. That person has to look like they're sleeping. They have to look like they're pleasant. That is one of the things that the embalming end of it, and I'll get into that, is I'm very anal about that. I don't tell a lot of people this. I prepared my dad when he died. My father was extremely ill, and for the first time, even he was sick when I was born. He made it to 68 by the grace of God, but I did it for my mom, my sister, because I wanted, and that is the first time I ever saw my dad look healthy.
Wow.
and the work I put into it, I blacked out as far as doing you get into that clinical mode. And when I lost it was when, my dad wore a sport coat, a regular shirt, tan slacks, and when I was putting his Skechers shoes on, So that kind of was my hitting point to kind of release a little bit, with that. But I take that everybody that walks in to the funeral home, they are now putting their most precious thing into my hands. And I will never, it's not just cookie cutter. Okay, next. We personalize, and this is not every funeral home and every funeral director should do this, and I like to think that most all of them do, but it's about that final. You plan a year for a wedding, and you get 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5 chances of that, So if those don't work out, and you get divorced, you can always do another one. Not saying it's right or wrong. I've been through one, but my thing is this is the last. I always say this to my families. This is the last 3D image of your loved one that you're going to get. The last time that you can physically touch that person, and we've had people that, and I'm going to jump all over again, but postmortem photography, if you've ever heard about that. So that was very big in like the early 19th century, basically. And what they would do is they would position, much like we're sitting on these couches, the live family behind the deceased, and they would have things to hold them up straight. You get a chance, if you get a chance, check it out. That
sounds terrifying.
But it was
just like eyes closed.
No, open. They would paint they would paint the eyes so that they look like they were there. They would have.
I'm crying because of what he said before, and now I'm laughing.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it kind of goes everywhere. But that was a very.
With sunglasses. No, I have a sleeve.
That was a very, very important part of people's way of grieving. It was when the infants, they were losing infants like crazy because of disease and the no vaccinations of things, of stuff that they didn't know yet. So there's a lot of pictures of babies that they laid out, that they had photos, because that was the last memento that the families had. So in a sense, that obviously has progressed, but it's kind of, people come up to me and they're like, Dave, I got a weird question for you. Well, no question's weird in either one of my professions. I'm like, just ask it to me and I'll give you the most honest answer. And if I don't know it, we'll find it out. Can I take a picture with Mom because she looks so nice? Absolutely. So we've had family photos around the loved ones, sisters that passed and mom and dads that have passed. And there's nothing wrong with it, because they felt that in most cases, if I did my job right, that's probably the best that person may have looked in the last 10, 15 years.
How do you honor the way that they looked with also making them look good? Because when my grandma passed away, they made her look good, but she didn't look like herself at all.
Right. That was
I walked in and I was like, she would have killed everybody in this room.
Right. And that's one of the worst responses a funeral director wants to hear. So when I go in, I am not huge on. Jaden has seen a lot of, a friend of mine that brought me here, has seen a lot of my people that have passed that I've prepared. I don't use a lot of makeup because I don't use any most of the time because you don't need to. There's ways that you can change those things. Somebody that was emaciated, death is ravishing, cancer is ravishing. You get somebody that used to be full, and my dad was 250 pounds, and when he died he was 180. So you lose weight. There's things that we have. Botox for the dead basically is what it is, and we're able to fill out those features to an extent to make them presentable. That's the goal. It has to. You cannot put something there that's not, if grandma didn't have rosy red cheeks and pink lipstick, or men didn't have purple lips in life, you shouldn't do it in death, And I think a lot of that happens because things are done too quick.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember growing up, there's a sweet old lady, her name was Rose, that lived next to us. And she was just a very simple, a widow for, like 2 decades kind of thing. And when she passed, I was unable to go to the funeral. My parents went. And they're like, they didn't recognize her because like they had her hair all done up, all this makeup.
Yeah,
and they actually didn't recognize her.
It wasn't her.
And it was
And that goes to the same thing, not just with the facial, but you can't put. I tell my families this: the days of all the women being buried in a nightgown or in their prom dress, or all the men being buried in a 3-piece suit. If they didn't wear it in life, don't do it in death.
Really?
Bring in
They'll do the formals.
Yes. So we've done, I think I've buried more people in Pittsburgh Penguin shirts and, and Steeler jerseys. We had a Steeler one where we set the casket up as a terrible towels all over it.
That is fun.
We had another one. The lady loved Christmas, and I knew this family for a long time. And I actually have a photo of it. They allowed me to take a picture. We decorated the casket with Christmas lights. I brought 2 Christmas trees back there.
You put the fun in funeral.
We did. I mean, in that part, you can say
slogan.
that for sure. But you know what? It meant so much to those kids.
That's amazing.
You know, because they were able to celebrate something in a hard time. So that's our goal. I mean, it has to be good. So when I say, even what I just told you, decorating the viewing room, I tell my families that outside of a vehicle, if I could fit it in there, bring whatever you want. You know, if that person, we had somebody that enjoyed a certain thing, bring it. We'll take our own pictures down off the walls and put family pictures up.
That's so special.
I tell them that place is yours for the hours that you're there. That's your home.
How do you do that and pass it on to other funeral homes or other generations? Because I've never heard of anything that kind.
Because it can't be about money. It can't be about how quick you can get that person in and out of there. It's a relationship. I have relationships that form from people that I buried somebody with them. After the door closed, the casket shut, and the body was buried, that relationship doesn't end. And it doesn't matter if they bring another family member. That was the last person we buried in that family. If they need help, there's a lot of the parts that I don't like, which is the paperwork part. But if we've been paid, but they get something, hey, you know, Dad just got this paper in the mail. I don't know what it is. It had something. Bring it down. And I'll sit there and let's go through this. And I can attest that. Any of my families you talk to, I can attest to that we do this. I don't do it because I have to. I do it because that's part of the relationship. I had to do that when my dad died. My mom was lost. I mean, she wrote the bills. My dad was the one that, you know, coordinated everything. So I look at everybody that comes in there, that you get somebody 80, 90 years old that doesn't know what email is or that doesn't have access. Come down. What's it cost me to sit with them and do something online for them or fax something for them?
It's a very honorable thing to do.
You know, so that's where the profession, and there is a lot of good out there. There's a lot of one in the profession that maybe just do status quo. I don't mention names. It is what it is. I just know that my name is on that facility that I work at, that house that I work at and live at, and that's another. I'll tell you that in a minute. I know I was going to freak you out, but
yeah, wait a minute.
But I'm immersed in this. This is something that has been a true. I don't even call it's not a job. This is a vocation. This is something almost like a ministry for me. Good.
Yeah, no, I'm curious when you were describing some of the setups, whether it was a Christmas kind of theme or the Steeler theme. And correct me if I'm wrong, or if you have different takes. I feel like over the past however many years, has there been a shift between like we're having a funeral service versus we're having like a celebration of life?
That's a good question.
And is like, do you grapple with trying to balance the death aspect versus like this person had a life and hopefully we can celebrate?
I think it has to be a mix, because with every death is a different situation. 5 people can die from heart attacks, but those 5 people could be 8, 40 years of age, 90 years of age, and 100. So you have to facilitate to each one. Of course, the younger one, you're going to have more of a grieving process. I shouldn't even say that. You're going to have a different type of grieving. So will the people want to do as much? You're trying to hold them hand to hand to get them through that process and whatever it takes. Whereas somebody that may have had a full life, full healthy life. My Spanish grandmother lived to 94 years old, wasn't sick until the last couple of years of her life. We thought she was going to make, the guy that works with me that I bought the funeral home from, Jim, he always said, I don't know if you guys on a Today Show or whatever it was, the Smucker's jar. So if you made the Smucker's jar,
100,
you made it to 100 or 102. And we always say that. We want to get the people in that have lived a great life and can make it to that Smucker's jar, you know. But this job is just like the police job is the same thing. Like there was never 2 calls the same. There's never 2 funerals the same. You know, you see the good and the bad too in both. You see the bad sometimes in families where either one of 2 things, they're going to come together because of a loss, or it's going to separate them more.
Have you ever had to intervene in a family?
Yeah. I try to play, and that was one thing with my law enforcement career. I was always the guy that could come in, and if there was a fight between somebody, my goal wasn't to put you in handcuffs and take you away.
Just diffuse.
If it wasn't, yeah, I always say we had to kind of be like used car salesmen. You come in and be like, what can I do to put you in? So a lot of times we were able to diffuse it because it may not have been an arrestable offense, but you wanted to keep the peace. And if you're not screaming at somebody and you're actually maybe relating to them, in most cases, depending on the level of intoxicity too, but most of the time you're able to do that. It makes you look good. You're getting the job done, until things maybe in a different situation change. But it's the same thing with this. You have things that people are derived sometimes because the life insurance looks more appetizing than the person laying in the casket because they know that they're going to be getting X amount of money. But unfortunately, the world is like that. People are different. There's estrangements in families. But some of the ones that make you feel good are the ones where, there's a dad that lived a full life and has children that are in their 50s or 60s that they're burying, and they talk about the hunting trips and the fishing trips and the vacations and those type of things. That's awesome. That is very rewarding, for me. And the business itself, you were talking about, so what really started a lot of, I think, even the masses of cremation now being more popular was because of COVID. We had families that could not see their loved ones because either you were allowed 6 people at a time in the funeral home. It was a bad time. And working through that, we did have an influx of deaths, and everybody was scared. And even me as a funeral director and embalmer, it was like you didn't know what you were dealing with. They had pretty much, and I don't know if you guys are young, but like the AIDS epidemic of the 80s, nobody really understood it. So there was different things written for funeral directors. Now, if you're going to prepare this body, you're basically going in like a spacesuit, Whereas then you realize COVID was the same way. Can I contract it from this person and blah, blah, blah. So you go through that. It almost felt like a revamp. But then I was way young when the AIDS epidemic started. But it's the same thing with this. And what was bad was a lot of these people couldn't have the funerals that they wanted, couldn't see the loved ones when they wanted to see them, didn't have contact with them, not even post-death, but prior to death. I had an aunt that died during that period of time. The only socialization she had with us was through the phone.
That must have made it really hard for them.
It was hard because there's no closure with that,
Do you feel like being able to see the body during a service, is that crucial
100%.
for like a grieving standpoint?
100%. I think that, and it's not saying that as, it's so funny because you get a lot of people that'll come in and be like, when I die, I just want to be put in a wooden box. And I said, well, they don't realize that the wooden box costs 10 times more than the metal one. So I always tell them that. Yeah. But what it comes down to is I think that physically seeing that person starts that grieving process mechanism. But you want to have, that's why that part of it, the presentation of the body has to be good. We've had times where the person maybe was not able to be viewed, okay? But because of circumstances, whether it be suicide or those type of things, where I've actually taken, because I know how important it is, and especially in a suicide case, you don't see that person or you don't have that closure because it was something sudden, whether you knew the person had problems or didn't have problems. So what I've done in cases was I've opened the casket, I've had a blanket from the head up and from the waist down and just had the hands exposed because they were fine, and let them come in and touch the hands. Because that point of contact kicks that process in motion. Because it says in your mind, yeah, that person is gone. We need to start to move along.
Was that your idea to just have the hands
There's
exposed?
people that I'm not taking claim for that.
Beautiful.
There's a lot of real. I learned the embalming skills in those from a funeral director who's now retired. That was very, very compassionate with people and I learned a lot. When I say be a sponge, I learned a lot from this guy, and I'll thank him to the day that I die, But there's people that are more, and the business itself now, away from those type of things, has gotten more with the cremations being so prevalent. Now we're doing, like with COVID, we're doing the celebrations of life because now the person, instead of viewing, they had to be cremated. They take the cremains, and when things got healthy again, they go to a park or they go and have their church services and those things with the cremation remains. So it was hard, for a lot of people with that. But I think the profession in itself, there's a lot of, when I was working for the one funeral home, I got to cover for other funeral homes, like not competing funerals, homes, but ones that are out of our area, as far as like Ambridge, Aliquippa Bridge. It's so funny. And even the Rochester Monaca Bridge, the other side of the river, even though it takes you 3 minutes to get across the bridge to get there, people think it's like two countries because it's like, once, oh, I can't go over there. It's, Ambridge or it's, so a lot of those I'll cover for them. And I got to pick up a lot, man. There's a lot of good funeral directors and people that maybe not be licensed that are in the industry to help. There's a lot of good people in this, that are doing it for the right reasons. Mm-hmm.
I just want to go back real quick. Just wanted to say kudos on, I know you didn't want to claim the idea, but even just like having their hands present. Yeah. Has there ever been a situation that was just either too emotionally charged or you were like, I don't know that I can handle this, or you struggled to kind of.
So what I do is in every aspect, you go through your head. And I did the same thing with law enforcement. You put yourself in the position of that person sitting in the chair next to you, the person that is sitting across from you when you're making the arrangements of, if I was them, like what would I want? How am I gonna do this? You need to listen to that person. Of course, there's going to be times where things are absolutely impossible to do anything for. We've had some cases in the past where the body had not been found for a period of time and was too bad for the family to look. But once again, it was a cremation. Of course, I didn't want them to remember that person that way. But similar to the hands, we put a very nice quilt over top of the cremation tray that the person was in. So they saw the outline and they were able to touch the blanket. And I got a call from the lady a couple days later and said, "Thank you so much for giving me that." See, that is where your mind should be. Not, now you can't see it. There's nothing. Yeah. Or the ones that, if there is something simple that could be done to make that person look better, that you have the skills to do it, try it. Try it. What's it going to hurt? You're going to do the best you can, and you're going to make the ultimate decision of whether you want to present that to the family or not. But you have to give it a go,
I very much appreciate how much thought. I mean, somebody, I don't know if he's like, this is a lost cause, but it seems like you take those extra steps to make a meaningful and impactful kind of.
I love what I do.
resolution.
I mean, people that know me, they know this has been what God has intended me to do. This has been my path. Everything, I think if I would have went to mortuary school before I became a police officer, I wasn't mature enough, age or anything, to go in. But law enforcement almost served as like the military for me. It was like that boot camp of, didn't know it was going to last 25 years, but but it got me.
You're well prepped.
Yes, very well prepped. Got me involved in a situation where people had to trust you to get them through certain things. You saw the worst of the worst and the best of the best, which was very few and in between with law enforcement. But I think it prepared me to go to school when I went to school, and that direction. If I wouldn't have had that first piece, I'm still compassionate, empathetic, and sympathetic. I think I still would have been fine. But the connections that I've made through every part of being out there in the community that I serve, I'm just serving them in a different way, and I like this way a lot better.
What made you decide, like, even as an adult, because I know you were interested as a kid, but as an adult, what made you be like, yeah, being a mortician, that's what I want to be, versus being like, using your skills as a compassionate person to work in a nursing home or in hospice or something? Yeah. Why after death?
It's so funny you brought that up. So my sister is actually a nurse practitioner in Erie. So she went the other end. She goes where the heartbeats are kicking.
She prevents
I go to
death.
Yeah, I go to the other end where they're stopped. Yeah, right. We're not in cahoots. Yeah. But you know what it is I don't know. I think for me, it's so funny, and I'll tell you this. So, like, some of the calls with the police that I've been on, nothing like the crazy stuff or whatever. I'm talking about, we had a gentleman that was bowling, and the guy bowled, and somehow, I don't know how his leg went the wrong way, and he had a compound fracture, went through. So I show up, and the guy is like, the bone in his leg went through. And I don't know if it was the weight shifted or whatever. And I vividly remember this. The guy was ghost white when we got there because we responded before the ambulance.
Responded when you were a police officer.
Police officer. This isn't. Yeah. Oh my God. No. Yeah. No, I'm sorry.
She was like, "How did he die bowling?"
No. Yeah. I was his leg. Well, there's a story about that too. Okay. No, but that was my mom's story. But yeah, no, it's all good. This was a medical call. So when we got there, but when I got there and the medic started treating him, I was getting like queasy. I cannot deal with anything like in the vomiting or any of that when the person's, but On the other end of it, I'm fine because it's just I don't know that it's odd, but that was strange. I never liked the blood and gut stuff on if somebody was still alive. But on the other end, I don't know. I feel like it's I don't know. You want the people to live, obviously, but if they do pass away, I should just say I'm more comfortable in that aspect of handling the aftercare. You know.
Guts and things look different after people die. Is that what it is, or is it just like
No, it's
like a
nothing with that. I just think
psychology?
it's because you know what I really think it is. Now that I'm thinking about it, is the fact that the pain is gone. When you're seeing somebody actively hurt, somebody actively in an ambulance or I'm sorry, in an accident, um, that's what really, you don't know what the condition is. You don't know what, when they're gone, it's the fact that they're no longer in pain. The suffering is gone, no matter what type of death, something tragic or something as simple as passing in your sleep. You know, I just am built having more comfort with that, you know.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you. So part of my background when I was in undergrad, I was a medic.
Hmm.
I had a couple pretty hard calls where the person had already passed before we got there.
Right.
But each time, I just remember being stuck with that feeling of like there's a clear absence of life, and this is something that is
Yes.
entirely different.
Yes.
Being around this, and you still want to care for the patient and the family there when you have to make the call and all that.
Right.
Um, does that strike you each time? Do you get desensitized to that over time?
No,
Or?
I think the police end of it with the waste, I always gravitated to the family. So even in the law enforcement, if there was a bad fatal accident, if somebody passed in the house, obviously there was nothing more that you can do for that person that passed away. Where do you go to next? You identify with the families. You tell them, hey, listen, we're going to make sure you get to where you need to go. Um, whatever we need to do to help you, we'll give you the information. Let's go get some of the belongings that he had. Let's get out of the house for a little bit just to take some air, have a cigarette, whatever you guys, want to do. So I think that was always kind of built in me. The police does harden you because you start to see so much. I grew up in a house that never had domestic violence. We had illness, but never that type of stuff. So like the first call I ever went on as a cop was like, you go into a domestic situation where there's, two parents beating the crap out of each other in front of their children. And you're like, what is this?
Yeah.
So
Just a foreign feeling.
yeah, 100%. It's very foreign. And over time, when those start to become from the first situation you've ever dealt with to the 300th, and they're all different, it does tend to harden you a little bit with that. And I think that's why, for me, my passion with the funeral service is it's a good feeling to be able to help in a different way, because there's no undetermined circumstance the person is passed, whether they're young or old, and we know what the job is to do. And the job is, and they always ask me, they're like, oh, you're working with dead people. We work with the dead people for a couple hours. It's the families. We're with them from start to finish.
That's such a good point to make.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks that it's, that, and they think that we work 2 to 4, 6 to 8. I'm like, no, there's 24 hours a day. My phone, I can sleep through a nuclear war, but my phone, if it rings that first of the brrr, I'm awake and on it, because at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's just, I'm programmed that way.
Do people call you first in a death?
Yeah,
Maybe
it
not
depends
first,
on the
but-
situation. Sometimes a lot of hospital deaths, the charge nurse will call and say that this person has passed. We get situations where the families trust me and they don't know what to do. And if it's a home hospice death where the person has been sick, Dave, I don't know what to do. And then you just have to advise them, you need to call the hospice nurse, have them come in, but we already know what's going on. We'll get everything situated for you. You have to give them comfort and guidance, and going back to like law enforcement is the fact that you can have a road closed to the right, but there's 17 different ways to get to your house. But because you went that way and the road's closed, it's like, oh my God, I don't know what to do, So as the policeman, you have to sit there and say, well, listen, you can make a left here and make a right there and this and that and get them there, It's the same kind of with this. You have to kind of guide them, take their hand, because even though they know there's another route at that time, they don't always know how to get there.
This is super off topic, but what skills are transferable for what you do? Like, could you now be a makeup artist or like a hairdresser because you know what
I
works?
do it all. I do it all
Yeah.
except for ladies' hair.
You don't do ladies' hairs.
I did one the other day. It turned out good, thank God. But
Hey,
it was,
good job.
I do all my own cosmetics, all my own embalming. We're like a one-stop shop. I have my own hearse. I have my own, equipment. That helps also because with you doing your own work, you don't have to contract anybody to do anything. Therefore, it keeps costs down, and we can pass that to the family. So we're not, as high as other places with that. And you're still getting 120% of the service, obviously. And I feel better because I am a little bit of I'm obsessive about things. And going back to what we talked about with the wedding situation, you can get married 100 times. You have one time to make a first impression with this. And that starts from even the handshake at the beginning of the meeting. If some people you don't know, we heard about you and we want to come there. They don't know you from Adam. And then you sit down with them, and at the end, they feel lighter walking out. You can actually feel them feeling lighter when they walk out because you're giving them the proper information at a speed that they need to get it at that point. Making myself available, and that's a good and bad thing. For relationships, it's a very hard profession to be married to somebody that is in this. Now, I was doing both, which were both 24-hour jobs, but with this, you basically put, now if there's an emergency situation at home or those type of things, but you put these other families in front of your own. Doesn't mean that you don't love your family. It just means that at that time things stop. There's no going to a party. There's no going to the reservation that you made 3 weeks ago because these people need you.
So, kind of on that, what is your favorite and least favorite part of what you do?
The favorite I can list, we'd sit here all day for it because there's so many aspects of this that I love. I just love what I do. The least favorite, which I've kind of gotten away from doing, was they call them the home removals or the removals from the place of death, where you actually get into your removal vehicle, go pick the person up at the hospital and bring them back. I had since now hired a service that they've been around forever. We're actually really good friends with them. So it's nice now knowing that even though that call comes in at 2:00 in the morning, I'm able to contact them. They're the ones I can go back to sleep after I talk to the family and say, let's meet at 1:00 in the afternoon. They go up and do that part of it for me. So that was always that. And I can tell you the other end is the paperwork. I hate the paperwork. I hated it in law enforcement and I hate it in the funeral end. There's more in the funeral end that I never knew there was this much until I started doing it because, there's all the loose ends there. You're dealing with governmental stuff. You're dealing with, your Social Security.
Oh, you handle all
We
that?
do everything.
Wow.
Filing insurance policies.
That's really nice.
Authorizations and documents. And it takes more to do a cremation paper-wise than it does to do a regular burial because there's so many authorizations and people that you have to have contact with prior to even moving that person to the crematory.
Now, is that standard for anyone who wants to be a funeral director, or is there extra things that you take on because you care?
So I'm a one-stop shop, and now that I have hired an intern who is, I'll throw props to her, Autumn, you're awesome, but she just passed her test. She'll be licensed in October. We are going to take her on with us. She's phenomenal. Yeah. And she has the same principles that I do. We're getting her squared away with my type of way I want the people to look. She's following very well. And in honesty, this is what I talk about being the sponge. I'm 48 years old and my computer stuff, like I know how to run a program, things like that. This girl has taught me more at that desk. I didn't know how to use Word properly and now I'm doing it, So she brings an extra oomph to the team. The other thing that she also does for us is she's allowing me now to have some free time and we're able to, like, the stuff that I always wanted to do, like send a card to the family on the 1-year anniversary of the passing. She had brought it up. I'm not taking any credit for it, but she does it.
That's so cool.
So it's something that makes us different from other people. But man, it's like the families love it and it makes them feel good. And it's something that we wanted to do. So she has that same type of brainwaves that I do with caring for people. And people gravitate towards her. And that's what I love.
That's special.
So did she just complete the same kind of training that you did?
Yeah, she went... She graduated, I think it was last year. So I'll tell you the education process. It is crazy. So we have, it's like I guess like a miniaturized version of a nursing program. So when you sign up for mortuary school, I went just for the diploma because I already had my credits. They do offer an associate's degree and they offer in funeral service and a bachelor's degree. I think they're hooked up with Point Park College. So if you're just going for your basic diploma, you go in, it's 60 credits per trimester. So you do 60 credits in 1 year. So basically a 2-year program into one. So you start with, we called it, for me, it was like boot camp, because we started with like 84 students, and you don't even see a dead person the first semester, trimester. It's chemistry, anatomy. Then you have your business classes, business law. There's everything. It's like a science and a business course all squeezed into one. You have to pass that block before you move to the next one.
Even if you don't want to own your own funeral home?
It doesn't matter. Yeah, we have dual
Wow.
license in Pennsylvania, meaning like in Ohio, I believe they have embalmer's license and then they have a funeral director's license. We're dual. We have both here when you graduate. So after you pass that first trimester, we lost a lot of people because if you don't pass that test, you have to start over from the beginning, okay? So I moved on to the second, and it's the same. Now you're starting to get into the preparatory stuff and the body stuff, and then your chemistry, microbiology, all that stuff, business law 1 and 2, accounting, all that garbage. And then the third, you have to pass that. And then the third trimester, you're totally cooked and your brain is fried. And you have to figure, too, I was working the full-time police job while I was going. So I worked, my chief at the time, who's awesome, God rest his soul, love you, Dan. But he let me go back to mortuary school, and I worked my 40 hours over the weekend. So
That's
I would
so
do
wonderful.
doubles. I'd finish up Monday morning and go Monday morning through Friday school, 8 to 5. So I was, like, cooked. But by the time you're done with your third trimester, you pass that, then you have to take a comprehensive final of everything you've learned in each 3 trimesters. You have to get a 75 or better on that exam. Once you pass that, then you can sit for your national board exam. You take that, and you have to get a 75 or higher on that. Once that is finished and you pass that, you'll know that day. Then you have to do a 1-year internship. After your 1-year internship, you have so many cases that you have to do in the embalming room. You have so many families you have to meet. You get all those boxes checked. Then you sit for your state boards. After you pass your state boards, it's a law and it's embalming part. Then you get your license. And that's where Autumn has completed every step of that. And she just passed. You're allowed to take your test prior to your internship being over. So she passed both sections. And then I believe it's middle of October, she'll get to actually have her license.
So was it right after the first trimester? Like, do you then start kind of practicing and working on?
Yeah,
Do
it's
they call it
well,
cadavers? Do you say bodies?
yeah,
Like, what's the right
they're
term?
cases. They call them cases there. And what we got a lot of is you see the worst of the worst in mortuary school, because basically you had a lot of the stuff you saw on Channel 11 News. The people that had gotten a lot of young men that got shot in gang type things, patching bullet holes and things like that from people. You get a lot of the coroner cases, the medical examiner's office, that they may hold a body for a month in refrigeration because nobody has claimed it. So after that period of time, you have to preserve it. So they would bring it to the school. We would preserve the body with embalming, and then it would go back into storage until somebody, claimed it or they did something with it.
Is there some kind of rights that has to be signed? Like they dedicated their body to science, or
That's
like,
different.
where
That's
does
a
that come
personal
from?
choice. You get a lot of homeless people that have no family. There's no lineage. So you can't just, there is a period, I don't know what Allegheny County is. Beaver County's different. Every county's different. But there is a period of time, I'm not sure exactly what it is, that after that person's unclaimed for so long, I believe they do a county cremation, meaning it's still, they're not putting you like 7 people in an oven. It's not like that. It is a individual cremation. And then I think later they bury the cremains. I could be wrong at that. We don't really deal with too much of that. I just knew that in mortuary school, we got a lot of the medical examiners' cases that were just people that were unclaimed. And then there were funeral homes that contracted the school that, to do the embalmings for them, and then the bodies would get back and have their services and things like that. I will give props to, I went to Pittsburgh Institute of Mortuary Science, and I do give props to that program because honestly, they give you everything. If you're willing to study and take things serious, they give you everything you need to get through those exams and to start your profession. The finite things, the embalming, you get those just like any job. Police Academy was the same. They teach you the basics, but until you get out into each individual field, you start to learn your craft. And I was lucky enough to have people that have taught me, and everybody has their different ways, even with like laying bodies out in the casket. There's Pennsylvania, this area, and kind of like the region where we're at, West Virginia, Ohio, that this small region, we have caskets that are, and I'm sure you guys have been to funerals, that are fully open, meaning the top. Anywhere else in the United States, they're called half couch, where the bottom's closed and the top is open. I wish we were like that because I think it looks nicer. But with that being said, everybody has a different way of laying out. The beds in those caskets are retractable. They go up and down. Some people like to leave them lower. Some people like to leave them up. The positioning of the body, the way the pillow is, the way the blanket is. Everybody does their own little touch on things, you know.
I've heard with cremation that the ovens are so much hotter than a regular fire. Like if you wanted to burn a body, for example, at a campfire in your backyard or something,
Yeah.
you couldn't do it. Is that true?
Yeah, what they just lowered the temperature now, but it was 1800 degrees and maybe 1600 now. I don't know what it is, but it's basically the crematory, the retort is almost like an afterburner on the back of a jet, if you would look at it that way. And the heat comes straight down, and you're looking at an average sized person, the process taking anywhere between 2 to 2.5 hours for a complete cremation.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. So then, like in the movies, or I think like the Vikings, and they would put a pillows.
Yeah.
How effective really was it? I mean, can you actually get it up to?
I think that was more of a rite for them, and they would put them on. They would float them out on that bed. I tell people that sit there and, the families you can joke with. And I says, well, when you go, we're going to give you a Viking funeral on the Ohio River. We're going to shoot the arrows. But I'm assuming any type of flame is going to get to the point. It's just going to be the length of time that it takes, and then you're still going to have skeletal remains, because even after that's burnt, because there is a process with cremation that helps to get those into a finer powder so that you can actually have them placed in an urn. Or if people, like a lot of the people now, even with cremation, we sell cremation jewelry. And when I say that, what it is just little vessels. Like you'd have a cross on your neck. They have a little vial that you can put maybe like the tip of a finger nail in there. And that people like to just carry that around. I am more prone. I'm not a big merchandiser with things, but there's two things that we do sell. Those vessels that people enjoy, and they normally ask for them. But the other, we do fingerprints of the loved one. Now, your fingerprint is the last thing that's basically identifies you. You're only issued one in life. So we will do digital fingerprints, and there's jewelry that you can get with that. Necklaces, I'm sure you've seen them. And the companies that we use, they actually have where you can feel the ridge of that person's fingerprint. That's okay. But, and for me, it's like, I get worried. I'd be worried about having cremains around my neck and a necklace, because things happen. If it ends up, I always say, if you're on a roller coaster and it flips out, they're down there with Uncle Tom's sunglasses that he lost. We don't want to do. So the fingerprint jewelry is nice because you're always able to get more from it, if something happens, or if you want to order other things. The men technically don't want to wear. They make bracelets. They're, watch things that you can put in there. So there's all kinds of. So I'm not a huge merchandiser. I never push anything on anybody, but if they ask, it's there to show them.
Yeah, I've seen someone that had a ring, and it actually just looked more like a decorative pattern.
Yep.
That it was their loved one's
Fingerprints. Yeah.
around it.
We do a lot of, also there's signatures. A friend of mine, actually the former owner, the original owner of the funeral home that I bought, very, very good friends with his son, JR. And JR actually got his mom had passed, his brother had passed, and Mr. Casper had passed. So he was able to get all three of them, and he got them tattooed on it, the signatures tattooed on his ankle. So it's kind of cool. But the cremation stuff is crazy because there's so much stuff that you can do. There's like they do in tattoos. They'll mix the cremains and tattoo ink now that you can get. I've done 3 of these in my lifetime. It's kind of crazy. Yeah. People don't realize though, that's like the cleanest form of sterilization. I mean, there's no.
That's true.
Get what I'm saying? Because the heat is so high.
Burnt.
So the other is paperweights or shot glasses that I did, where they take the cremains, you send them out to a company, they blow the cremains into a glass. They're orbs, they're beautiful, and then you can display them. You're laughing.
I love that. That's
that.
Interesting.
That expression's awesome. He's like, and then the other one is we put it in the bottom of a shot glass, where they blew it into the bottom of a shot glass, which it's personal to whatever's taste that they want to do. And, God bless them. If that's the way they want to remember them, then that's their choice,
I've heard of a process where you could take the ashes and have it be like condensed into a gemstone.
Yes, very expensive.
Yeah.
Never asked to do it. Nobody's ever asked me to do it. but I think the affordability is up there.
It seems
know.
very special though, because apparently like each person makes a different color. So like you might be a diamond. I don't know. You might not be. I don't know how that kind of stuff
I'm
works.
an emerald. No, I'm kidding.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I heard. It's
No,
interesting though. I don't think it's like deep colors, but it's like a slight variant from yellow all the way to green.
I would love to see how that. I'm sure I could look it up how the process is done. I just know that families that have asked about it, the expenses is quite up there. So.
You also mentioned earlier that a wooden box is more expensive than a metal box. Were you being funny, or is that true?
So if you look at the cost of a wooden casket, and they even make them now, and you know how you have your laminated floors and things like that, they make a laminate casket that looks ideal to a wood. The cost is less. But if I'm comparing a base metal casket, okay, to a base wooden casket that actually is a casket, not just a tray or something like that, yeah, your cost is going to be higher on the wood because of the wood cost and the manufacturing that goes into it.
What if somebody had like just a box built on their own, like you wrote it out in your document or whatever, like please literally just go to Home Depot and build me a box.
Sure.
Is that allowed?
Yeah, I mean, there's really no requirements that state that you can't do those things. What cemetery law requires of the persons to be buried in the cemeteries themselves, depending on what each law is. Now, we have Jewish cemeteries. We have where there is no embalming. It's basically the body can be shrouded and buried, or the body can be placed in a special casket that has no metal on it and buried because they believe that you go back into the earth. A lot of the green, have you ever heard of a green funeral? Green funeral is not the color, but I've done 2 of them. I was going to say 3, but I've done 2. And what they are is basically it's a wooden casket, wicker casket, and they basically place the body in that, and they take it. There's a place out in Pleasant, I think it's Pleasant Hills. There's a cemetery, a green cemetery, and you're buried right. There's no headstones or anything like that. You're just buried into the earth.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long does it take a body to decompose like that?
You know what? I'm not sure, and I think a lot of that is dependent on the temperature conditions, how close to the surface they bury, if they go below the frost line. So I'm assuming it'd probably be a faster process with no embalming, because embalming obviously delays. Now, I've done a green burial where I had to embalm the body because it was a person that wanted to be viewed, and under state law, we have to have embalming done. They make a special fluid just for that does not contain any formaldehyde. So you're getting a very, very temporary period that you can safely view the person before they're buried, but it's not going to have any harm on the environment.
When I hear embalming, I think mummies, basically.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
then it's a preservative
Correct.
stance. But can
Yeah.
you go into a little bit more detail? What does embalming actually mean?
You know,
today?
it's funny. Everybody thinks like the myth of we're taking all the organs out, or none of that is true. We're basically making the body. They always say it's the beautification of the body, also sanitation and preservation. Those are the 3 main things that we want to make happen when we embalm somebody. Going back to Egyptian times, obviously the spices and things that they used were different. They did, per whatever religious things that they did back then, they had canopic jars that they used to take, like they'd go up through the nose and take pieces of the brain and those type of things. So it wasn't so much for, I think, for the beautification process. I think it was just something that they did of what their beliefs were. Embalming became very, very popular during the Civil War. There's a lot of the Holmes, I think his last name, was the first one that did embalming, because what was happening is you had such mass quantities of death during the Civil War that people wanted to bring their loved ones back, and there was no way of doing that because you had railways, and that was really the only way you had to ship. Odors, the decay of the body happening at a quicker pace. So this gentleman had invented, at that time they used arsenic, believe it or not, to embalm. Abraham Lincoln was embalmed with arsenic. And not the best chemical, and it was very bad for when they would bury them because it was hitting the water lines and things like that. So that's when they kind of went away from that process. But that's kind of what really started like the American way of viewing and preserving the bodies. And then from there, it started from people just doing, or cabinet makers that would make furniture. They were also called undertakers. And what they would do is they would make, just like you're saying, Home Depot, they were making their own casket and they would sell them. And then it started with home visitations. And that went, I talked to one guy, they did it as probably in the 70s, they were still kind of doing it before the evolution of the funeral home itself. So they would have home layouts. My grandfather, my dad was 6 when my Spanish grandfather passed away, and they laid in 1949. They laid him out in the house. And it's funny because the more I talk to people, like the funeral home that I have was built in 1920. And if you look a lot of those houses, the windows in the front are very big. Not for decorative purposes. They're big because when someone did pass, they would be able to take that window out, bring the casket in through, and do their viewings in the house.
They thought about death when they were building the houses.
I don't know about so much of that, but that was a purpose for some to have that size window in there. So we have, I don't do answering service, meaning a lot of funeral homes after like 5 o'clock, they'll put an answering service on where they'll take the calls at night. If it's an emergency, they'll send it to us. If it's not, we can take it. They'll give us the message. But if it's not urgent, And I had it for a while, and I found that, and Mr. Hahn, the gentleman I bought the funeral home from, he basically made the recommendation that, people want to hear your voice when they call. So I had got it written, and plus it was expensive. So I got rid of the answer. We're talking like $500 a month based on a call volume of like 100 calls. It was crazy. So switched over to this. This has blessings and curses. I do have the spam telemarketer blocker thing, which is cool. But like we could switch the phone, so Autumn's getting the phone lines now. But still, I don't know. I give so many people my cell phone number. They won't call the business. They'll call. Right. So, but it's just part of the, could I make life easier by going the other route? Yes, but I'm fine with this because after so much time you get, it just stinks sometimes. You want to go upstairs and just kick back in the recliner, and it's like,
you get a phone call and it's like, what do you need?
Yeah, right.
Business of pleasure.
How can I help you? It was like, we get ones. It's funny because
two guesses.
No, there's some weird. We get one that, is Casper still there? I was like, no, he died in 2005. Well, I had a friend of mine that died in 1964, and I wanted to know where they were buried at and the day of the funeral. And the sad thing about it is we have books that go all the way back to the 20s.
Oh, no. Well, that's actually really nice, but oh, no.
Yeah, it's like there wasn't the record keeping like now. I'll just put it to you that way. They sold these tremendously large books, and every funeral home had it because there was no computers. And it had like all the pertinent information that you needed, and then it had service information, and there was another section where you had the bill. And that's how it was done. Yeah, I say it was a lot easier. The paperwork now, that's going into that. I mean, it's crazy because this is supposed to be easier. So after COVID hit, the death certificate system that we used to take when the person died, we'd go to the doctor's office. The doctor would sign the death certificate. We would take that to a registrar. They would put it in, print us out the death certificates. We'd give them to the families. Now this is supposed to be easier. We get a medical worksheet that looks like the bottom half of a death certificate. We fax that over to the medical provider. They have to fax it back to us. We enter all the information into the computer. Once we get the medical worksheet back, we upload that. That goes to the state. The state then has to register it. Then it goes to our registrar, and then they call us to get the death certificate.
Why is that easier?
It's not.
Okay.
So that was, So the only benefit of it is now for people that have passed, like we started doing it in 2020, I think around there started getting where you can't do it any other way now, but we have record, meaning that if you had somebody that passed in 2020, you have to order death certificates if it's 90 days past the death. Other than that, you would have to, we would have to drive to Newcastle, pick them up at a vital statistics office. Now they're in the computer. We can order them via mail, and they come in about a week.
I was always under the assumption like a doctor or medical examiner signs the death certificate, but you also, or is it 2 signatures on it?
2. So the first one is they do the cause of death and the verifying, and then we do the first part that has like name, so security number, date of birth, and all that. Where the cemetery that we're using, what funeral home it is, we sign our signature and my license number to it. So that's always been part of the death certificate. Yeah. And they went from $6 to $20 now in this wonderful state. So yeah, I get them back because, families used to get 10 for $60 and now 10 costs $200. So I go through it with the families, like we notify Social Security, so you won't need one for that. Let's go through some of your personal things that does they have a bank account? They'll take copies. So we normally end up getting the families like 3, so $60, and then we'll make a ton of photocopies for them. So that burn through all the photocopies. When you're done with that, if you run through your originals, call us and we'll get you more. So, but that's what 80% of those phone calls while I was talking to you guys were death certificate related.
Okay, so we get back to embalming for a second.
Yeah.
So I had a dorky question,
sure,
science-wise. So obviously when the person passes, the heart stops beating, so blood can pool in the body.
Correct.
So when they do embalming now, like in present day,
Yeah.
do they have to like remove blood, remove
Yeah,
fluids,
so-
everything, and you substitute it?
Yeah,
or?
quick overview of the embalming process. On a typical average embalming, our system is like plumbing. Obviously, the heart is the base of the plumbing, and then you have your arteries and veins that carry the blood through the places they need to go. If it's a case that is not where the person, let's say, age of 60 years old, passed maybe just of a heart attack, there was no other implications, it's a 150-pound male, let's say. We make an incision on the clavicle, which is this bone. A lot of people break those in sports injuries and things. We use the right side because that's the first side that we always go to, is the right size. And we make a small incision. And you could, right now, if I cut you the incision size that we make, not the depth, but the incision, you could put some Neosporin and live with it. It's not like it's this, we're slicing, and then what you do is you basically elevate the jugular vein, you elevate the carotid artery. And then we have an embalming machine. The embalming machine actually is the heart after you pass. And what this machine does is you put your preservative fluids in, and there is a myriad. I could probably line one side of this room to the other with the different manufacturers and the types of fluids that you use.
So it's like a bypass machine almost? Like
it is. It injects, and what it does is when it injects at the flow rate, so how fast the fluid's going in, and there's a pressure valve of how strong that fluid's going in.
Has there ever been a mistake? As in, oh no, it's too fast or too much pressure?
You have the
Blow a line.
yeah.
well, it's not so much that is that you could swell the body, because now you're pushing in something too. Just like if you blow a balloon up too much, eventually it's going to pop. It's not the fact of popping; it's the fact of just the swelling, and it's going to give you an effect where you don't want. It's going to distort the features. Okay, so you have to be very. There's a lot of like. Slow and steady. There are guidelines that are set for, and there's 3 or 4 different machines that you can purchase. Just like you have a radio in your car. This one may be made by whatever, like your phone, Samsung. They have different brands, but the concept is the same between all of them. Is the fact that you want to get the steady flow and the pressure to the point where when your body stops, what you're talking about, the gravity taking the blood, that's called postmortem lividity, meaning that when you pass, all that blood has to go to an independent area. So if you fall over onto this table and you stay like that, of course the blood is going to pool to the place of least resistance. It's going to go to your face. If you die, most people die lying in a hospital bed or at home on a hospice bed. It's going to go to the back because there's no longer something pushing that. So what the machine does, it actually stimulates that fluid and stimulates that blood to get pushed out. So we inject, it's kind of backwards. So what we do is we inject through the arteries. And then what happens is once it hits the vascular system, you'll start to see like the veins in the hands and that, knowing that you're getting pressure in there. The jugular vein will expand, and we use that to drain the blood. So basically, you have injection of preservative fluid, the jugular expels the blood. Okay, and then you can tell the difference because you can take a hand, for instance. The hand, most of the time, it gets what's called mottled, meaning you'll have like the fingertips will be dark blue when somebody passes because there's no circulation getting there. The hand will be different colored. Once the preservative solution gets in, it has dyes and things in it, the hand will come back to a normal color. The nail beds will clear, and the body becomes you look more natural. And there's a chemistry to that. The fluids, there's all kinds of stuff. There's the formaldehyde-based fluids. There's fluids that are glutaraldehyde-based, which are like an alcohol-based that are, the fumes of the formaldehyde could really, they're not good for you. So there's some that are reduced exposure. There's also things for different stuff, like if a body dies, just like they give somebody that has swollen feet Lasix, which is like a water pill to get rid of the water. We have that in the form of solution. So if the person's hands were extremely swollen, we can mix a dilution of fluid to help to bring that swelling down so they look natural. If the person is extremely emaciated, meaning that they're just wasted away completely, there's no protein left, we can go ahead and use a humectant, which adds moisture to the fluid, and it'll plump places that aren't full, and there's different textures, and everybody has their own different, like how they want the body to turn. Some people like the body to be rigid. I myself don't. I like it to feel natural. I like the skin to be pliable, but still well embalmed. Where the family, when they touch the hand, we can't do anything about the temperature because most people, when they're dead, they're cold, and that's not going to stop. But if the skin can be pliable, meaning that when they touch it, it's velvety soft in that aspect, it does help because it's more natural. You're not having that rigid, that correct stuff, right? Like a coffee table. So there's those things. The biggest part is what goes into the machine for the fluid because you're basically replacing the blood with a preservative agent, but it has to be mixed to a point where you get the desired results. And different people have different manufacturers. There's actually one of the popular embalming fluids is called Dodge, believe it or not. They've been around since I think the 1800s, but they all have different types, and we go by what's called index. So basically, the number that's on the bottle, if it says 5 index, that is going to be the least astringent, meaning the least formaldehyde containing product. So you're not going to get that hardness that you would, as opposed to on the higher end, there's one that's 36 index, which is going to be, if it's not diluted enough, you're going to get a hard body. Yeah. So there's different aspects. So there's a lot of stuff that you really have to play with, almost like grandma's spaghetti sauce. You got to make sure she put a pinch of that. As gross as that sounds, but you put a pinch of this and a pinch of that. I was gonna say you're almost like a little cook back there with making sure that fluid goes in the right way. And then there's other things that we do, like setting features, meaning that we want the mouth to look normal. We use things, they look like hard contact lenses. They're called eye caps. Those are used to, when you pass, your eyes will, the eyes, there's no more luster in them, and they do tend to drop back. So this helps to keep that contour so they look natural when they're laying there. So all these little things add up to what the last and final presentation is.
Were you afraid the first time you had to do these things?
No, the first time that I did it obviously was in the training phase in school. So it was different. I think what bothered me, I can honestly say this with it, was the people that we were working on, there was no connection to them, if you understand what I'm saying. There's no, like, this wasn't Papa Joe's grandma that we knew that I could feel comfortable with. So I think the coldness of that maybe bothered me a little bit. But when I started getting after the training and got back into my own realm and started taking care of people that either I knew them or I knew the family, it became personal and you felt like you were actually doing, something, I don't want to say something good, but you were doing it. It was more heartfelt because you had a connection with that person.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very off topic, but you mentioned that you live above a funeral home right now?
Yeah. So what I did was, I had a very nice house I built and everything, and I had gotten divorced, but after that, we had sold the house. I was living in an area, I had another beautiful home, but I was driving 20 minutes to get to the funeral home, and that is not a business that's 9 to 5. So Mrs. Casper, the original owner's wife, and she was like a second mother to me. I was with her for 11 years prior to her passing. That whole family lived upstairs. That was something that always happened in the past. Most funeral homes, if you go back that are older, the family at some point in there lived on the second floor of the funeral home. It was
Is that why it's
just
called a funeral home, not a funeral?
yeah, they some call it a funeral parlor. I mean, I don't know if it's so much for that. A lot of them like homes for funerals, but basically it was designated. Whereas before they were laid out at the house. Now we have a place for it. So I think that was more the meaning. But a lot of the owners tended to live above them just because it was, and most of the neighborhoods back in those days were better than they are now in some cases.
Their last name was actually Casper?
Yeah, not like the ghost. It was with a K.
I didn't
Yeah,
catch that.
sorry.
Still.
Yeah.
They asked for Casper, and if they were joking or not.
It was shortened, and it's funny. Like I was telling you, an ethnicity in Ambridge, there were so many. The Italians we went to Christ the King Church, Catholic Church. Then you had the Ukrainians, and those went to a different church. And the Polish people, they had a Polish Catholic Church. Mr. Casper, they shortened the name, obviously, but he handled everything from the Polish church. All the funerals he did were from the Polish church. So that's kind of how that formed. But very respected and well known in the area. Walt was a good guy. So what we ended up doing was after the market was really good, so I decided to sell my house that I was living in Bridgewater. Took a lot of those proceeds, and the business was doing well, and totally did an entire renovation on the funeral home, walls ripped down, everything, and that included upstairs. So instead of buying another house, we put that money that I made into the renovation and also into the renovation on the second level where we live. And I mean, if you walked up there, you wouldn't even know you were in a funeral home. I mean, it looks like a New York City, like a loft. We have opened up walls, made the bathroom bigger, those type of things. So for me, and we did different colors upstairs. Like we did the grays upstairs, and then the downstairs is all neutral and bright earth tones. That has helped me out tremendously. That renovation, you change a little thing in a place that people were so used to seeing before. We made a big overhaul. And what that has done for me has been unbelievable, because people now are like, this is where I want to be. It's beautiful in here, without even knowing me, you know. So a lot of that, and then the word of mouth carries from there. So we've had a really good reception, but it needed it, you know. A lot of these places you walk into, it's like the furniture hasn't changed since 1950, and you know, and some of it's nice, and I know it's coming back, but you got to refresh some things, you know, carpet and those type. But for me, like, I am so comfortable there. There was never, you know, they talk about, I like the paranormal stuff, don't get me wrong, but have you ever seen anything there? There were so many good times that were held upstairs in that apartment, in that living situation, from the families and Christmases and everything there. I don't feel any negativity up there. I just feel like, and the same thing downstairs. I can walk downstairs in a pair of shorts, go to the basement, come on, I'm fine. You know, it's home. And you know, and there's another aspect of funeral service, and it's called trade embalming. And what that basically is the people that don't want to own funeral homes, they just want to do the clinical part of it, they can go ahead and get contracted with 10, 15, 20 funeral homes and do all their embalming for them. And you can make a lot of money, but it's a hard life to live, because who's covering for you when you're gone? Or, you know, when you're going on vacation and things, you're on call. A friend of mine,
just always traveling then?
always
Just
traveling
on site?
from, yeah, they may have 5 accounts in Beaver County and 15 accounts in Allegheny County and Butler County. They may have some more accounts. So they show up, they bring their little bag with them like a doctor used to do at home, and then there's really no overhead, because you're using everything that the funeral home provides. You're just giving them a service, and that's pretty much it. I did do a little bit of trade work for 3 or 4 funeral homes in the embalming end, on top of everything else. And as now my business started to grow, I've had to kind of step away. If somebody needs something in a pinch, I'll help out, you know, and normally never say no.
Yeah, so definitely for like just the people who are listening to this, if they were kind of like in a fork in a road and they were kind of thinking, do I want to go down this, you know,
Yeah.
this road and enter into this field or not? Is there any advice you would give them, or things they say like, well, if you're not okay with this, or if you're terrible at chemistry, or if you're, you know, those kind of things?
See, and I can't even say that, because like when I went, I was 30 years old when I went back to mortuary school. So I felt like I was reading, you know, I had chemistry since ninth grade, and I was not the best at it. But you feel like you're like reading a book from the middle backwards, because it's like, but if you're willing to put your heart and your effort into it, anybody can get through the program. What I say is make sure you're mature enough to go through it and know what you're getting into. I don't, just like law enforcement, I have friends of mine, their kids, Dave, can they talk to you? Can you help them out? And there's some that just want to try it, and there's some that that's their passion. Mortuary school was the same. I think we graduated out of the 84. Some went to the different programs for the extended education, but I think we ended up graduating out of my class about 24, because of the attrition. You know, there's people that left, some didn't pass, some just got disinterested, you know.
Did you say earlier that you had like 84 and it went down to 24?
Yeah, it was 84, and then some of the classes split to go to the associate's program. We had some that just couldn't pass the first trimester, that had to get held back until they passed it to move on to the second. So I'm telling you, like, the first trimester was boot camp. If you didn't really put your heels down, and that's why I go back to being the mature. I couldn't have done it at 18. I really couldn't have, because I don't think I would have been buckled down enough to do it, you know. But I would never, if it's a passion of yours, and no matter where that passion lies, whether it's in the clinical field of the embalming part that interests you, whether it's the family, getting together with the family, those type of things, or planning the event, you know, I would never, you know, try it if that's something that you really love. But also be advised that this is not a Monday through Friday job. This is not a banker's job. You know, this is a life calling. This is 24/7. Unless you have a funeral home that is doing 400 or 500 calls a year, that you have a huge staff, that you can have a schedule and those type of things, that's fine. But if you're looking to own or work for maybe a smaller facility, you're it. I'm it. It starts with me and ends with me. And it's just, there's a lot of work involved. That's all I have to say. But if you're willing to put it through and your heart's into it, my God, try it, because it's very rewarding. Very, very rewarding.
This is kind of dark, but have you thought about who you want to embalm you when your time comes?
Yeah, I think the guy's going to be passed away, though, I hope, before I go.
Oh, no.
So for me, if that's something, they always ask you, like, what are your fun? I really don't know, because we counsel and advise, just like I tell everybody, make sure you get your ducks in a row, make sure you have life insurance and your estate planning done. Here I am telling them, and I have nothing ready yet.
Oh.
And I'm up there, and I'm like, okay, you're not 25 anymore. You need to get this stuff in order. I'll be honest with you, if Autumn, the intern that I have, she's been following very closely with my procedures in the back and knows what I want, I would trust her.
Wow.
Kind of piggyback off of that is you talked earlier about, again, either having like a Christmas theme or the Steeler terrible towels. Have you thought about how you would want
I'm
to
going to
be
blow your mind.
interviewed?
I am
All
going
right.
to blow your mind. You are sitting
Roller
next
coaster
to,
Kennywood.
yeah,
like a weekend at
yeah,
Bernie's.
was going to come down inside. Yeah, they're going to carry me around. I'm going on the front. I tell Jim Hahn, the other guy that I bought the funeral home from, he always sat on the porch during visitations with a cigar and a rocking chair. And I says, when you go, God forbid, I am going to bronze you, and we're going to put you in that chair so you're there forever just rocking.
Oh, my
But
gosh.
I am an beyond enormous Elvis fan. You have no clue. Like, I own a jumpsuit and the whole deal.
That sounds like another podcast.
Yeah.
When we get off the air, I'll show you pictures. But
Oh, you.
I want laid out in my jumpsuit, and I want all Elvis is all I got to say. So Burning Love, if I get cremated, play Burning Love. So
That's awesome.
But yeah,
Hunka,
so
hunka.
if anybody that knows me, those are the two passions that I've had in life is Elvis since I was young, and then obviously doing the funeral service stuff.
That is
Yeah.
such an interesting
I was going to say, I told you
combination.
it's going to blow your mind.
Yeah.
Wow. I bet your birthday parties were weird, or your birthday presents. You know what I mean? Like, what do we get this kid? Elvis or a skeleton?
Yeah. And I've gotten both. My card holder is so funny. So a friend of mine bought me I think it was Leah, my girlfriend bought me, it's a casket card holder. So I have all my business cards on my desk. And when people, I said, grab one of my cards. And it takes them a second to like, oh my God, that's a coffin. And I was like, yeah. So I got half of it like with that. And then of course I have the Elvis. I just got this. It's an Elvis clock, and the bottom of it goes like
I've
this.
seen
Yeah.
those. That's cool.
Yeah. So that's hanging in my house. But yeah, so we try to keep the king part of the downstairs a little bit too, without getting distasteful,
Even right now, just like we're lighthearted and laughing. Is laughter is that a part of
Huge.
your profession that's allowed? And
Huge part. Yeah.
Really?
You have to be comfortable with it in all aspects. And because a lot of the memories that people have of their loved ones, big thing we do are videos. So the videos on the thumb drive, we have a TV in the back, and we'll play the videos with music or without music. And there's a lot of happiness in those pictures, because that person maybe was not always sick, or if it was tragic, you want to remember them in that light. So there is a lot of joke telling. I am a celebrant, so I do, for people that don't have a particular faith, I'll do them non-denominational type services I'll do for them. And with that, part of it is opening it up to the people out there to tell stories. And a lot of times people are on the floor laughing with a lot of the unique characteristics of people. I want that at mine. I want them to know that I was a nut job, and that I, loved things. And I think that that's part of it. It doesn't have to be, the rainy day outside and everybody's somber. There's going to be time. But even the most tragic cases, in the most part, there is good memories, and there's good things that can come out from that. And once again, just like seeing and touching the body, it's the same with that. Those feelings and emotions help to start that. And sometimes people that can't see their loved ones, that's all they have to remember. So keep that alive.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
What
I'd-
would?
okay.
Oh no, you go first.
No.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, what would you recommend would be like the best way for somebody to grieve who lost somebody close?
So I don't know if I could even. That's a good question, but I don't think I could answer that. It has to be with them individually. There's a lot of families that I meet that come to me and say, "Hey, Dave, I can't cry, or I haven't cried," and I tell them it's perfectly fine. With my dad, I had to play funeral director during that, and to truly, truly let things out, it was 3 months, and it comes at the weirdest times and weirdest places. I was brushing my teeth, caught my eyes in the mirror, and lost it. So it's everybody has their unique. Some can do it right away and just get it out there, but there's a lot of times where it may take. It's like telling people counseling. You need to go to counseling, right? And I don't like when people do this to others. You're bad. Listen, I know you're upset. Listen, you need to go to this grief group. They may not be ready. They're just trying to comprehend and understand what happened in some cases. Let them go on their own time. The loss of a child is the most horrific thing you can have. They need time to process, and they need time to go when they're ready. So for me, there's no timetable with that. There's no timetable with when it's right or when it's to start or when it's not to start. That person knows in their mind when it's ready, when they're ready to begin that. My mother was very close with my father, and I reference that because that's what I know personally, and I've been through it. So she'll be a widow now 12 years next month, and this is still September, right? Yeah, October. Okay, next month. I don't know half the time what day it is. So what ends up happening is, my mother to this day is still, even though she's now been alone at home, her neighbors and the neighborhood is great. It's like that old school. Everybody watches on her. Her neighbor next door had just become recently widowed several years ago, and they're the same age. So she's more of a go-getter where my mom would just stay in the house. So now she's getting out. But this past weekend, she had a meltdown, and it was one of those things where we know how to fix those with mom. We take her to the casino, and she's happy. So we did that yesterday. And,
Hit the one-armed bandit.
Yeah, right. So with that being said, but those stings and those ebbs and flows will go on forever. It's that part of that person, how close that person was, and, what they want to do. And being in this facet of the job, you get to see so many different types. You see bad too. You see estrangements where families have just stopped talking, and the last thing they want to do is even deal with us, and well, just do whatever. I don't care, And you got to deal with that end of it too. So you see and I'm not saying that's the worst, but you see the good and the bad in things, And unfortunately, with the way the world is now, with everything, with the drug epidemic and those type of things, I saw it a lot in the law enforcement end, but we're losing a lot of people to, drug overdoses and those type of things. And it's hard, and it's no age bracket. We had a gentleman that was in, 50, 55 years old, and the parents were still alive, and they're burying their 50-year-old child, and they're in their 80s. It's just, you see all those facets, and a lot, it's hard to swallow. There's some that really, hit me hard. Friends, very close. I just recently buried a very, very close friend of mine. Cried like a baby, but we did it, and the family knew that was part of it, that this person had an impact on everybody, including the person that was doing the final wishes for him and giving his final farewell. But that is the biggest honor anybody could ever get, is handling that final service for that person, that final goodbye. Because you feel like not only are you standing in the front directing it, you also feel part of you is sitting in that front chair or that front seat going through that with the family. I get a little emotional about it, but yeah.
When you talk about laughter, after my grandmother passed, my grandma died when I was 4, and he died when I was 27. Yeah. The funeral, they did the slideshow of pictures, and they started, when I was a baby and born and all that. And one of the last 2 or 3, we didn't know this was coming.
Yeah.
Someone at his church had taken a picture, and he had turned, made a super silly face.
Yeah.
And they got a picture of it. And that was one of the last pictures that came up.
Yeah.
And everyone just died laughing
right.
because they remembered also that aspect
yes.
of him. It was so perfectly placed.
Yes.
That was one. And 2, he was a big woodworker.
Nice.
And so my parents and my aunt and uncle, they invested, whatever this casket, it was hardwood. It was
beautiful.
It was gorgeous. Had all these secret compartments, so all the grandkids, we could hide
it was a
one thing inside of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But sweet. The thing weighed a bajillion pounds.
Yeah.
And he was, I think, 82, 83. Still had some friends alive that very much wanted to be, the honor aspect, wanted to be a pallbearer.
Pallbearer, yeah.
These were not strong dudes. And my brother and I were in the front, and we were just
so you were getting the brunt. Yeah.
Lift your legs. It was so heavy.
Yeah.
And it was I don't know if it was just the emotion of the day, but I remember just the weight of it. And then we carried it on, once we did the procession.
Procession. Yeah, to the cemetery.
And then having to carry it.
to the spot, to the
It
grave.
was
Yeah.
in loose gravel, and it was so far. Like they're like, we can't get the vehicle down there, so you got to carry it. And
Oh my
I was like, please God, don't let me
God.
drop this
Oh
thing.
my God. Thank God I didn't have to do it like
Oh.
New York style where it's on your shoulder. You know, I still to this day don't understand how that works. But do you ever see that where we grab on handles? Woods are extremely heavy, hence why they cost so much. They are, and it's almost a shame to put them to bury them. I hate to say that. Like I always said, I want to get my casket and leave it up in my like office so that I can at least enjoy it a little bit before we bury it. But and that goes to the other point. I know we're off right now. This is just personal talk between us, but like, you know, I tell people that come in and say, you know, the pine box thing, or I don't want anything. Just let me, you know, go in the woods or whatever. And I tell these families, and I said, you know, you take your ring, a nice ring, a piece of jewelry. You want to take a shower, you want to go where you work on the house or whatever, you're not going to wear it, obviously. What do you do with it? You don't throw it on a counter. You put it in a velvet box or a velvet drawer and you cover it. You get what I'm saying?
Aw,
So why would
yeah.
you want to take something as precious as that person's life and just, you get what I'm saying? They use that body for 80, 90 years, sometimes less, sometimes more. Why wouldn't you put that person in some, not saying you got to spend $1 million, but put them in something that is respectful for their life. Do the same thing. We include an urn in our cremation packages. It's not this like little box that you know it's an urn. We have one that has a tree of life saying on it. It's made of walnut, and we give it to the people because we want to show them that like persons cremated, we understand that, but they should still have a nice vessel to be in. So,
I was just curious. So, uh, in the time that you've been in this business,
mhm.
have you felt like the way that people treat life or treat death has evolved or has changed? It's different. Because I feel like even today, the way that people think about death is
Yeah.
different.
It's different because things now, what you didn't have before was what you call price shoppers. You have people now that they may not have a connection with the funeral home or the person. They know that mom is sick, but they want a price shop. So they'll call 7, 8 places to see who has the cheapest price without really getting to know the person. So that's become more common. There's nothing wrong with it, but before it was always like, you know, we always went here and that we were always taken good care of here, so we're going to handle it. Now it's, yeah, they went there, but because Funeral Home C costs $600 less, we're going to go there, you know. So that's been a big change. I think the traditional funeral, and when I say traditional, similar like what you were talking about with your grandfather with the services and yeah, they're getting away. A lot of the families are getting away of wanting to go to a church or they have not been part of. And I'm not talking about Catholic. I'm talking about any church. So we're having a lot of our services now at the funeral home, even Catholic services. So we're providing where used to be funeral home, church, cemetery. Now it's funeral home, cemetery. You know, so we bring the clergy, or we have a lot that just, it's that my age bracket or family that it's starting to get to the point where it's like they don't focus so much on I don't want to say religious, but the traditional aspect of what a funeral used to be. Going back to what we talked about earlier with the 3-day funerals, they are now 1-day funeral the next day. You know, so there's been a lot of change. There has been. This profession has changed. Cremation has changed tremendously. And I, you know, a lot of that comes to the cost reasoning too. You know, not just family wishes or the person's wishes. They may say, I don't know what I want, just do whatever. And because things are expensive, it's expensive to die. I mean, it is. I'm not going to lie to you. But there's factions of that it could be cheaper maybe by doing a certain thing as cremation as opposed to having to worry about a cemetery, paying that and those type of things. So that has become more accepted across the board.
Yeah. Have you ever been doing an embalming and you feel like the person is there with you, or you're like, I can't say like, I don't think this person is dead, but you just like feel maybe a presence?
I understand. I can honestly say I'm going to say probably no, because even with the families that I do know, I know that they've gone on to a better place. So I've never really feel, you know, I always tell people, they say, you live in a funeral, it must be haunted. And I'm like, no, we're the stop before the final, you know, we're the guest house. And I tell families this, and it may sound corny or cheesy, but it brings some families comfort to know that with us living upstairs, that person's never alone. They're not in a room that's dark. They're always in a place that has life upstairs. And for some people, I would want to know that, not knowing that the building's empty and that their loved one is just sitting there, even though it's the shell. It may not be the spiritual or the presence of that person, but the shell that they served in those years in life. There's somebody there to guard them, and I feel like the guard of that. So I don't know. I don't really get. I think when I'm in the embalming room, it's more of a clinical type thing where there's heart there. Don't get me wrong, but my job there is just like if you had a car, a classic car, you want to make sure that engine's tuned perfect every time you start it. I want everything that comes out of there to be the best. If it's 100%, it has to be 110. That's just me.
Dave, thank you so much for taking time.
My God,
this has been so insightful.
You guys are great. Very easy to talk to. I've never done one of these before. Anytime you'd want me to come again, I would love it. And
you're welcome anytime.
Yeah.
This is great.
Get off camera and talk about Elvis and find out
more.
more. So.
God, I got some
the
pictures to
king.
show you there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, folks.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks.